So Ray, when we're done, I'm gonna send you the login for our YouTube stuff and you can put that up on YouTube for me because it's saving to the cloud, so it's saving on your account. Yes?
Okay. Yes, sure. Great.
Awesome.
That sounds great. Great. Yeah, I'll message you about that and some details about descriptions and stuff that we can go over. Cool.
Perfect. It's just it takes up a lot of space on my hard drive, so I don't like saving them to my hard drive anymore.
Well, I hear you. I'm having to move all my work files and stuff like that around because my programs on my computer right now don't want to work for me. The Adobe stuff, I go to do something in Photoshop and it says, oh, the disk is full, can't do that, sorry. So that's the way it goes.
And of course, Zoom doesn't let you save it forever on the cloud, so.
Oh, that's really good to know.
Mhm.
Really.
They unless you have like and I don't know, you'll have to check into your stuff at the university. Because unless you have like the enterprise massive account, you can't save them for more than, I think it's like 3 months or something.
Wow.
Yeah, so check into that, make sure, otherwise you'll lose all your recordings.
Ooh, stuff like that just always freaks me out.
It's always back it up, Corey, always.
Yeah, yeah, right.
All right, well, we've got lots of people trickling in. We got 2 more minutes to go. Welcome, everybody. It's good to see you. Hi, Karen. It's good to see everyone. Chelsea, Barb. Oh, and Vanessa, welcome. We're going to get started. We'll give people just 1 more minute or so to log on in, and we will get started with our program today. You can give a wave to Katrina. Katrina German's on the call. There she is.
I was still muted. I owe everybody a beer. Yeah.
And I'll just say note about AI. I'm recording with spinach.ai today. Katrina, are you familiar with Spinach?
I haven't used Spinach, no.
Okay, well, we'll talk afterwards.
Yep,
Spinach
nice.
does some amazing stuff. So basically it will record everything and organize all the information into the format that I want. And it does, right? So it takes a text version of the call, which is the data, and then it manipulates the data in whatever way you want to tell. Yeah, so it's pretty cool. Check it out. I'll talk to you later about it.
Beautiful. I love it. Yeah. Hi, Sharon.
And we are recording today for folks joining us. If you would rather not be part of the recording, I suggest you change your name to something innocuous and just leave your video off. Otherwise, we are recording. This recording will be available to all of you, everyone who registered. Afterwards, when we get it up on YouTube, you'll get a nice note in your email. So right now I'm going to hand it over to my colleague and partner, Fleur McQueen-Smith. Take it away, Fleur.
Okay, thanks, Bonnie. You can hear me, right? Excellent. I've just switched over to another screen. So good morning, everybody. My name is Fleur McQueen-Smith. I'm the manager of the Saskatchewan NEAR, which is the Network Environments for Indigenous Health Research, which we are co-sponsoring today. Bonnie and I founded KM in the AM in 2014. So we've worked together through various capacities over the years. So first, I just want to acknowledge that I'm speaking to you from Saskatoon. I think many people are here from Saskatoon, but KM in the AM goes out across Saskatchewan and beyond, but we are focused on Saskatchewan, and it is the home of Treaties 2, 4, 5, 6, 8, and 10, and traditional homeland of the Métis. And in my work, I'm very privileged every day to work alongside and learn from Métis and First Nations people. And this is a really big part of our network. And so I was very excited about learning from Katrina and from Sharon today. So I'm really happy that we're able to sponsor this and to record this and to share it further. So we're going to hear today from Sharon Angus. Well, actually, I guess I'll start with Katrina because I think we're hearing from her first. So Katrina is the CEO and founder of Ethical Digital, and they are really changing the trajectory of the internet through their digital strategy, research, and certification. She is going to talk a little bit about AI, and they've had a project around Indigenous women in tech, and I think we're going to learn quite a lot from her this morning. And Sharon Angus, then we'll hear from Sharon. Sharon Angus is a Cisco certified IT instructor in the IT support specialist program at the Saskatchewan Indian Institute of Technologies. She's been there since 2020. She's from Thunderchild First Nation. I think she has also background from Akwesasne First Nation in Ontario, Quebec, and the New York border. She lives in Saskatoon. And I understand that Sharon has been breaking barriers in a lot of areas because there's hardly any women doing this role in Saskatchewan, and I think she might be the only Indigenous woman that is. So we're just very privileged to hear from these two women today, and I want to just hand it right back over so that we can get going to what you're all here for. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, is this a good time for me to share my screen and everything? Okay, beautiful. Thank you so much. And I also have a long-term connection to Bonnie. We used to work together way back in the day when we were in literacy at Saskatchewan Literacy Network, and we ran several campaigns. In fact, we reached 2.4 million people in one day with a campaign asking people to read to their kids. So it was a really, really cool experience. So it's always nice to cross paths with Bonnie again. Also very pleased to be here with Sharon. I was very fortunate to work with Sharon on our Indigenous Women in Tech project. A couple of years ago, basically I was looking around and I had already been speaking a lot about how we needed more women involved in technology development. But as I looked around, I thought, we, from the technology perspective, from the industry's perspective, we need more Indigenous people involved here because I truly believe that technology is the future. It is shaping every single industry and it's influencing every single person's lives in the world. And we need all types of people and all sorts of people involved in creating that future. And so we actually came at it from a bit of a different perspective from the industry, the technology industry. We wanted to study how can we get more Indigenous people involved? Like how can we connect and technology almost has its own community. It's its own form of financing and building a company. And so how can we connect communities so that we can really all benefit from each other and making the magic happen in the future. So Sharon was part of the advisory committee right from the beginning. We had absolutely incredible coordinators who ran the project. And the final coordinator who ran the project, her name was Alina. She did an incredible job of really developing, and connecting the two communities. So we ended up culminating that project in a hackathon with the idea of can we connect, and actually create some technology products or just make it so it's easier to connect the two communities and have a really meaningful development process. And so we went through this incredible 2-day experience with Reconciliation Saskatoon. SIIT was an incredible partner on that as well. We worked out of their beautiful space there. And we had a hackathon. And I will say, we had, people from around North America, or sorry, not North America, but Western Canada. We had people come in from Manitoba, different places. We had a lot of women. We had mixed genders, and it was incredible. We had people come in to mentor from a lot of corporations. And one of my favorite parts, some of the feedback that came back from this was, a lot of realistically, a lot of the people who work in technology do tend to be, older white guys, particularly in some of the corporate roles. And a lot of them were actually really, really touched by this whole experience because they're like, when do I ever get an experience to hear 5 Indigenous women talking about what they need and how can we apply technology to solve those issues? And so it was one of those things where every single person who was at that hackathon really came away empowered, understanding the world in a different way. And it was a really, really incredible project. I think, my arm hairs actually stand up a little bit talking about it because it was just something. And then after that, we had several of the people who participated in the hackathons move forward with their business ideas. In fact, I think one of the women went ahead to win a cultivator which is an accelerator out of Regina. They won an award, or they were a finalist in one of those pitch competitions. So just really exciting to see how, you know, an event can become such a catalyst for, you know, just change in people's lives. And you know, across the board, everybody who participated in that really came away with different perspectives. And so really amazing, amazing a project. So I'll let Sharon talk a little bit more about that too. And she's going to be really speaking to a lot of the, you know, Indigenous development, Indigenous values when it comes around data. But I thought I'd begin today by kind of giving more of a context around artificial intelligence and, you know, what is it exactly that we're dealing with here. So I'm just going to share my screen. And let's begin, because I really want to talk really more almost from the ethical perspective of what we're talking about when it comes to artificial intelligence. So, as you know, introduced, I've been involved in technology for a lot of years now. I always say since Twitter was a baby. And Bonnie and I, again, we're actually, you know, kind of starting around this in this space together around that same time. I've since developed two technology products that are software based. And one of them didn't do so well. I also have a hardware product where we're creating solar panels in the north end of Saskatoon and shipping them to the States. So this is a fun time with all the tariffs right now, figuring out what that looks like. But I'm also just about to launch my second software company called Elm, Ethical Language Management. And the idea behind this is when you go to the ChatGPTs and the other large language models, you often, it'll sometimes reference where the data came from, but it's not, you know, a lot of that data we all know, and I'll talk about this more extensively, is kind of stolen. It's just scraped right off the internet and not really given any IP to people. So what we're doing instead is we're making it very easy for organizations to scan, cut and paste a text, or they can scan a website or scan a document, and then basically it'll say, hey, page 6, there's a term you use chairman instead of chairperson. Would you be interested in changing that? You're the human, you decide, but in the meantime, alert, there is an issue with this wording. When it comes to, you know, data around that piece, the very first iteration of the technology, we're using open source data, which means that it's been said, yes, people can use this wherever you want to. But the next iteration is that we're actually going to nonprofits, universities, associations, those groups who have spent tens of thousands of dollars on staff time and community consultations to create lists. They then put them online and hope people use them. But what we want to do is license those lists from people so that we can kind of have living data and make sure, you know, they can update the lists as communities change and language changes around them. But we're also doing a revenue share with those groups so that they can actually see some of the benefits of the data that they've created. And hopefully down the road, when we get enough of a big library of data that's ethical, that's been approved and licensed to us, we'll be able to in turn license those to the big large language models, and everybody can benefit from the use of data. So anyway, we're, you know, there's a few different things that I've got going on, but I spend a lot of time thinking about this particular space, particularly from the development side of artificial intelligence, in that how do we create things that are, again, good for humans and good for our future, and making sure that people are benefiting from the IP that they're creating. So basically, when we're talking about artificial intelligence, I'm going to show you this photo of me. And this is just, you know, one of those photo software. And what you're going to see is that it's pretty close. I threw in a couple of photos and it gave me a bunch. There's one of me in a swimsuit and, you know, a bunch of different other things for choices. One, I think I did dress as a cowboy or something. But, you know, this is one where you can see, when I look at this, you probably don't, you know, see my face as closely, but it's there, but it's not quite there. And that's what I want to talk about when it comes to AI, is there's a little bit of a distance so far about how AI is actually being implemented compared to the hype that AI has had in the last little while. There's a lot of things that AI is doing that are really incredible, that are, you know, is working really well, but there's a lot of things that are still pretty bumpy in the technology. And so that's something to really be thinking about throughout this whole thing, is that we're still sort of in the infancy of this new era of AI. And sometimes that means, you know, we're going to see some, you know, some good things, some fun things, but there's going to be things that just aren't quite there. And so that's going to be one of the themes that I want to talk about throughout this time. So when it comes to artificial intelligence, the thing to remember too is that this has actually been around for years. It's been around since the 1950s. And so this is not a new topic. And, being from the industry, this comes, about every 10 years, everybody gets excited about this. But I've never seen anything kind of in terms of the hype that we've been seeing around artificial intelligence ever since ChatGPT came out, because what happened there is that people, the average user was actually able to see, oh, this is a really neat application of AI right now. And then what we saw is a lot of, people flocked to it. We're getting very excited. It got a lot of media. And then we see a lot of investors get excited about this topic again. And so we start to see, last year, I was at Collision, which is a big tech conference in Canada in Toronto. And almost, there's hundreds of tech companies there displaying displaying their software or their hardware. And almost, I would say 98% of them had AI in there. Hey, we're AI. And so it's a really big trend internally in technology as well as externally in the world. But it has been around since the 1950s. And basically, it's just the idea of, can we make machines that work outside of what the direct instructions that we've given them? And so there's always this question, is AI the end of the world? And so I got a few different people who've weighed in on AI. So Stephen Hawking says, it could spell the end of the human race. It would take off its own, redesign itself at an ever increasing rate. Humans are limited by our biological evolution, but we couldn't compete. We'd be superseded. So that's Stephen Hawking. We got a smart guy who's thinking about it from that perspective. Elon Musk, who's Mr. Anti-Regulation, actually has a quote out there that says, I'm increasingly inclined to think that there should be some regulatory oversight, maybe at the national and international level, just to make sure we don't do something very foolish. I mean, with artificial intelligence, we're summoning the demon. Then there's the other side. There's a group of very smart people out there who are thinking that actually AI is going to be the thing that saves us. So, the former CEO of IBM says, I think it's going to augment our intelligence and really make us to be able to be better. Artificial intelligence is not a substitute for human intelligence. It's a tool to amplify human creativity and ingenuity. So this is another fellow, Fifi Lee, who is from the Stanford Institute for Human-Centered Artificial Intelligence. So this is somebody who's genuinely just studying this just deep in. To say that AI will start doing what it wants for all its own purposes, like saying a calculator will start making its own calculations. And I just like that one, is it kind of brings it down to a level that we can all understand. Will a calculator just start working on its own? I think it's going to be somewhere in the middle. And I think I like what Tim Cook from Apple says. What we all have to do is make sure we're using AI in a way that's for the benefit of humanity, not to the detriment of humanity. And so there's a lot of things that, I think are going to be really made better and just easier and just smoother as we're using technology. But I also think there are some areas of AI that we're going to have to spend some time thinking about. And as a group, the technology companies, governments, users working together to really come up with some solutions. So the biggest thing that we're going to talk about, and this is something I find important to kind of share with people around the idea of AI, is most people are aware of this already, but you're already using AI almost every time you're using technology. Almost every software that you're using has included some sort of AI component in it, especially now, a year later after all of this hype. So here's just some examples of your everyday use. Every time your Netflix or Amazon makes a recommendation, when you get a fraud call from the bank using Google Maps, how do they know when to redirect you? It's because they're using large amounts of data and saying, hey, hold on, a whole bunch of our phones in this area have slowed down. Therefore, we're going to send you this direction instead. Participating in social media algorithms. There's nobody sitting there and actually saying, yes, this is something that Katrina would like to see on Facebook. It's algorithms, it's artificial intelligence, but I'm working for years to kind of be like, hey, we have an idea of what you'd like to see and trying to present those ideas to you. And then anytime you're using a virtual assistant like Siri or Alexa, that's artificial intelligence involved in that particular space. So this has been around for years before you're even probably aware that our AI was, such a hype. There's been a lot of these groups have been using AI just in your day-to-day use. But here's the way that I like to break this out, and this is something I think is important for people to understand around AI, is that there's different levels of it. And so when we're talking about, is it something that's going to benefit us, or is this something that's going to kill us all? There's a few different ways of looking at this. So the very first is basically reactive machines AI. So they've got a large data set, they make a decision. So exactly what I was saying about the Google Maps. Basically, we have a whole bunch of information. This particular road seems to be slowing down. We're going to make a decision here. So they just have a lot of data points that they're able to draw information on in which to make decisions. So again, this is going on regularly all the time right now in a lot of different software. Then there's the limited memory AI. And so this tends to be something that's a little bit more advanced, but this is really around the idea that the AI can learn, but kind of in short terms. So one example of this is self-driving cars. So a lot of them, can kind of be like, they'll start to learn a little bit and they'll be like, hey, it was slippery yesterday on this corner. I'm just going to take it a little bit slower here. It'll actually make some decisions based on its own experiences, not amassed data, and make some decisions going forward about what needs to happen. So that's also underway. There's a lot of different technologies that are using that. But when we get into more of the questions of, is this going to be a problem for humanity? It's when we get into the numbers 3 and 4. So the idea of theory of mind AI, which is trying to replicate emotional intelligence. Like, can we have a piece of software that can basically not only make a decision just based on data, but make a decision on all sorts of the nuances of being a human? So, the context of a lot of these different things. And so, there's people out there who are, there's all sorts of things that have come out in the last year, particularly. One of them that's been regularly talked about is this friend where you can wear it around your neck. And basically, it's an AI friend. It'll record everything that's going on and it'll talk to you about it afterwards, where it's like, hey, how did you feel about that conversation with your mom? Well, here's what I thought. And it actually becomes even though it's trying to use some emotional intelligence and make some guesses based and get to learn you in order to respond. So that's where things get a little bit edgy, because again, there's a lot of different people would have a lot of different emotional responses and contexts to different situations. And they're maybe not represented in how we're actually creating that AI. And we'll talk about that here in a moment. But it's really this idea of, can we ever get the data to the point where it's not just making decisions on a really, black and white, here's data. It's the AI is actually making decisions on a lot of contextual information and trying to add sort of the nuances of being a human. And so this has been done with very limited it hasn't really been done very well yet. A lot of people and a lot of the robots and different people who've been trying to talk. Actually, there's a lot of people who are finding they can be very comforting. So there's actually maybe some good things that are coming out of some of this. But there's this thing called uncanny valley, which is very similar to that photo you saw of me at the beginning, which is, it looks very close to a human, but it's not quite there. And so there's sort of a gap where you almost kind of get angry at the picture, or, it kind of brings up an emotional response because it's not exactly what you would do or expect from another human being. And so that's something that's sort of coming out of this idea of theory of mind AI. And then the really kind of the scariest one is the self-aware AI. And this is the one where basically, and there's talk actually, that's what's been going on in OpenAI, is that there is actually this idea that the AI is getting to the point where it's so much smarter than humans ever could be that we almost can't communicate with it. So we almost need like a former version of the AI. So like ChatGPT 2, in order to regulate what the newest versions of OpenAI are, because humans aren't smart enough to follow that. So that's where things get a little bit edgy, because it's, again, this is all based on data and and building blocks. Who created those building blocks? What kind of places are the AI and technology going to take it? So when we're talking about regulation, it's really often tends to be around these points 3 and 4. So there's a lot of different ways that people are using AI in their businesses. This is actually from late last year. I'm assuming these numbers might have even changed in the last couple of months because this changes regularly. And it is getting to the point, when, like I said, even a few months ago, there was only something like 35% of businesses that actually implemented AI, but it's much, much higher now, just simply because of the buzz and, what people are doing and seeking out AI in order to be implementing into their day-to-day plans. But again, here's when it comes down to is, some of these ethical considerations. So I'll spend like the next 5 minutes and I'll send it over to you, Sharon, just talking about this. But the very, very first question, and this is something that we really want to be thinking about a lot, and this is something Sharon will also be talking about from that Indigenous perspective, but where is the data coming from? And this is something when we look out, one of the big issues and all the big strikes that were happening amongst a lot of the Hollywood people late last year was because they didn't want to be having their images used without their permission going forward, and basically having the studio own the digital version of them. And, they could create movies and all sorts of things and put their name in front of things, in the future. And people were saying, no, I own the rights to my personal image and to my, my voice and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of artists who've been creating things and putting them online, and a lot of that's just been scraped. So there's especially a lot of the visual AI programs, that's coming from somebody's inspiration, and they've spent, years developing that, and suddenly someone just came along, said, thank you, stole that and went. In fact, there's a lot of different lawsuits going on in the States, I believe Postmedia here too, and potentially Postmedia, I believe, is suing the open AI for just, basically learning off the language models and all the different news stories that they've been creating for years and years and years with no permission, no payment for that data. So you really want to be thinking about that's going to become one of the biggest questions in the future. And I think a lot of AI companies will have to account for where they got their data in the future, because it is important for us to be acknowledging and thanking those who are creators, for those particular pieces, and thanking them financially as well. The other question we want to talk about is, where is the data going? And this has become particularly interesting in the last couple of weeks, because for a period, nobody was really that concerned that OpenAI in the US was, basically everything you type in, it's learning from that. Every document you scan, there's a lot of groups who won't let any of their employees use OpenAI simply because they're saying, no, we're learning from what you're putting up here. And we just had DeepSeek come out, and it really disrupted the AI space and the US stocks and tech stocks, because it was just so big. Now I use DeepSeek, and it seems to be a very similar experience to using ChatGPT. My son, who's a developer, though, he says it sees it from the other perspective, where he's actually, using it for development. And he's like, it is beyond what you could ever expect. And so that's why it was such a disruption. But right now, recognizing anything that we're doing with DeepSeek is going to China. They're very clear about it. We are storing all your data here. And so that's, something where we know the Chinese government has used data and a lot of online spaces in some ways that we might not align with our North American values. And so anyway, there's just a lot of things to be considering and being really aware of as we move forward as users, but also as government and regulators. We're also perpetuating stereotypes and bias. A lot of the base of things is really based on, a certain group of people who've been creating AI for a period, and sort of the way that we're seeing things, as well as a lot of the data that comes in. We're seeing, some of the stereotypes and bias that happen in our society being perpetuated even further because some people are just not being represented. An example of this is, for example, there's been AI used in hiring for a lot of years in the big corporations who get hundreds of applications. But what they were finding is people with certain names or certain genders just weren't making it to the final step to be hired. And they realized this was just an issue with what had been put in for data, where we're like, hey, we want these type type of skills, that sort of thing. And it wasn't as inclusive as required. So a lot of people weren't getting the opportunities to move forward. So that's something really to be thinking about from the stereotypes and bias perspective. Job loss. I have a digital marketing company. I could probably, about half of my employees now just use, I could probably lay them off because they're writers and designers, and we do have AI tools for a lot of the things that they're doing. So that's something to be very conscious of as you're growing a business or as you're, involved in anything, that this will be something that will affect employability for large swaths of our population who are content creators. I think it'll evolve. I think it'll be a different role in those places, but that base creation is going to be affected. But again, to make everybody feel a little bit better who are like, oh no, the biggest thing we realize is at this point, you still need humans involved, because, every one of us can tell a story. If you've used ChatGPT at all, it'll say something very authoritatively. It'll sound very true, but it might not be true at all. You need humans there to be fact checking, bias checking, making sure there's no misinformation, making sure there's not a fifth finger on that photo. And so there's a lot of different pieces here that we still need humans involved. As we move forward, though, and the tech gets better and better, that may become less important in certain industries. But I still think having those humans, that critical thinking, that let's make some content that's authoritative, that's going to be the way that we're going to be moving forward. So those are some of the high level ethical questions that I wanted to talk about, but I'm going to step aside here and I'll ask Sharon to come and share her thoughts, because I know everybody's really excited to hear from Sharon. And anyway, thank you very much for allowing me to share some of my thoughts on the ethical side of AI.
Hi. Yeah, I'm Sharon. So from my perspective, it is really interesting because I do talk a lot about it in class lately. From an educational point of view, there's always the idea that where students are just taking the information, having it sort of regurgitated for them so that way they can answer the questions and everything. But it doesn't really promote a sense of true understanding, because um, uh, sorry, I'm nervous. As Katrina said, that it's not really true, right? And somebody in the comments I see that says Chat GPT is about 95% true, but 100% convinced that it's true. So it can be. I've read cases and things like that where educators are talking about how the students are just using this regurgitated information that's scraped off the internet, right? Oftentimes without one of the things I always talk about with AIs is that it is not, um, it completely lacks critical thinking, which is one of the things that makes us human, right? So one of the issues with that, though, is that because the general public doesn't really fully understand how it works and everything like that, they take it as uh, as truth, right? So when it comes to students, and that's something we work on regular basis, it's much better to rely on your own critical thinking skills. It is simply a tool. It is not a means to an end, right? We're not. It is not the end goal. Uh, sorry. It is a means to an end. It's a tool that we use to actually find the information in a quicker way. I'm a big fan of sci-fi. When we look at science fiction, AI has always been there. When we talk about Star Trek with the computer, who replies to them and has a nice, pretty voice and things like that, and they tend to take it as um, it's being presented again as a tool, not as something that's making those decisions for the humans, right? So I always thought that was really interesting, kind of how I ended up getting into IT and stuff like that, was thanks to science fiction. But one of the things that I've noticed is, second here, let me share my screen. There we go. So what we see here is I asked Copilot to generate an image of an Indigenous elder, and the original image was here. And I said, make it a winter scene. So then we get this image, and there's we run the risk of, when it comes to Indigenous portrayal. I also talk about this in my Indigenous studies class with my students, where we were covering film, Indigenous representation in film. And we can see that actually AI is regenerating that, bringing that pan-Indianism back, where there's no separate cultures, there's no separate nations or anything like that. It tends to just present it as though this is a representation of everybody. And that's kind of dangerous, even in the sense that what we saw in Hollywood back in the day, when we think about Indigenous people in film, one of the first representations was what's that guy's name? The cowboy. What was his name? You know, the one.
I got Fleur says tan too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's no, not Tantu. It was that Wayne, John Wayne. Oh my God. Thank you. Sorry. John Wayne and his representation in his films of Indigenous people, where there were all very negative stereotypes. And then we moved towards their sort of this renaissance in the 90s, where we started seeing more much more honest and current uh, representation of Indigenous people in film, where such as Dance Me Outside or Smoke Signals. Now the thing is with those movies is that they were written, especially Dance Me Outside is based on a white author's representation of Indigenous people. He was quite close to the community, but at the same time, he was not a part of the community. So that was his interpretation of what our lives in the modern time looked like. So when we talk about these Indigenous elders, this image, for example, it's pan-Indianism. It's not a really great representation, but we run the risk of repeating the past, because again, it's getting its information from what already exists on the internet, right? And the data that has already been published and everything else like that. And if we don't have control of that in the first place, this is what we're going to end up with all the time. So and then when it comes to our, like Katrina said, it is data scraping off the internet, right? So it's just taking anything that was published previously, and if that's already negative, it's just regurgitating that. So, but on the other hand, is that the way it scrapes the data, there's no protocol involved in what is correct and what isn't. What should be shared and what isn't. And we have that built into our own cultures already. But that's not shared on the internet just yet. It's getting there, kind of thing. But we have to be in charge of what we share now. We have to think about how we are going to manage this in the future, because right now the way it's going is we get like we either have it's going to take over the world and we end up with Skynet, or or it's going to just remain a tool. And I would like to see that it would be absolutely remain a tool, something that will more like Star Trek, as opposed to the artificial intelligence in Star Trek, as opposed to the artificial intelligence in Terminator movies, right? And there's a chance for that to go very, very badly if we don't decide now. On the other hand, there's also, we have to think about AI in the sense of not just it is a tool, yes, or that it is creating these images or whatever it's generating. We also have to think about the environmental impact not just our personal or cultural impact, because it is changing the culture of our world as we speak. So how do we manage that? How do we actually become aware and spread that awareness to make sure that we don't let it take off on its own, right? We have to set boundaries, and we have to critically think about it and actively think about how we are going to manage this, because AI is not just affecting um, our AI is not just affecting uh, our social media and how we interact with one another, because as it is, um, all technology is really about that it's created out of a need for humanity to connect with one another. So how do we make that connection honest? And how, otherwise, if we don't have honest connection, we end up with bad relationships with one another. And we don't want that. We want everything to be as um, we want to have honest and genuine connection in us. And that AI isn't giving us that right now. But how do we guide it towards that direction again, so we end up more like Star Trek as opposed to Terminator? And when we think about it, sure, that's just an overall, and again, it's a huge generalization how AI works and how we interact with it. But we also have to think about the environmental impact, because when we talk about any technology or anything, we often, sure you guys have heard the term 7 generations, right? The seventh generation. We look back to our elders, to our ancestors 7 generations back to learn, but we also have to think about what our impact that we're having today is going to affect our 7 generations after us, our descendants. Are they going to be happy? Are they going to be connected? Are they going to survive? Right? So we oftentimes think of that. But right now, when we're talking about generative AI, like regular AI is one thing, but generative AI takes consumes a lot of resources, like a massive amount of resources to create these images. That's a lot of processing power. So even though we tend to think of it, technology as something separate from humanity, it isn't. It really affects us on a daily basis. We talk about it all the time, you know, whether or not children should have access to unrestrained access to iPads. And that's a conversation we're having now. But when I was younger, that conversation was about video games. And the generation before, that conversation was about television, access to television, right? So now we're taking all of that, and it's sort of being uh, really mashed together, and it's got several layers to that. What are and how are we affecting our children with this AI? And not just from a mental and emotional perspective, but also from an environmental as well. It does affect every part of our life, whether we want to admit it or not, or even to accept it. And if we're changing our environment on a grand scale by using this type of technology, and we don't even really think about it, because we feel like we're removed from it because we don't see it. But on even just on a regular basis, in a day-to-day life, when you think about running your games or playing, watching movies and stuff like that, we think about our laptops and how much they heat up. Now add that, think of that in a huge scale that up upwards enormously, and we have that's what generative AI is doing, and those resources that we're consuming. So aside from all of, we have our environmental, whether not it's we have our culture, whether or not it's going, do we provide for it, and they're trained by somebody. So who is training it, and who is who's deciding what is correct and what isn't, because somebody, a human uh with critical thinking skills, needs to go through the data that it is regurgitating and correct it. but it's regurgitating data on such a huge scale that how are we supposed to keep up with that? How are we supposed to ensure that it doesn't go off the rails on us? So we need to start thinking about that type of thing now, and the sooner the better, because where are we going to go with this? What are we going to do? And is this going to hurt us? Is it going to, and again, we tend to think of things just as our own personal art, like this is, how is this going to affect me? But we also have to think about how is this going to affect future generations? Where is it going from here? So, yeah. Does anybody have any questions?
I see that there was a question in the chat just about if you had given the AI instructions for a Lakota elder or a Salish elder, do you think you would get something different, or if it would still be like a pan-Indigenous picture?
Well, let me see here. I will show you what it looks like. So we will put in Plains Cree Elder. It takes a little bit, obviously.
I think it's great for those who don't use it regularly also to see how it works. So I'm
Yeah.
glad to see this. Yeah.
So yeah, when we start creating these prompts and everything else like that, so here we go. This is its representation of a Plains Cree Elder. And again, we have this headband, which no North American Indigenous community actually used. The headband comes from the John Wayne era, where they were hiring non-Indigenous actors, and they were all wearing wigs. And the headband was designed to keep that wig, to hold the wig on their heads while they're doing the show, while they're acting. So here what we're seeing is this, there is again, another example of how it is scraping from the internet, because those images do exist from that Hollywood time and continue to be moved forward. I mean, even think about the Addams Family. Addams Family Values back in the late 90s, early 2000s, whenever that movie came out, where there was a scene where Wednesday Addams is playing the Indigenous character in their Thanksgiving Day parade play at camp, and her her costume, which is actually a costume, not regalia, very big difference, but that costume again included that headband, because that's what the representation, that's what the wider culture recognize as Indigenous wear. So here we are, we're actually, even though I put in a prompt specifically asking for a Plains Cree Elder, this is what I get. And it is not completely accurate. There is some, and again, we're getting towards that. We're getting it's getting a little bit better, I guess you could say. Even a month ago or a year ago, this image would not look anything like this. It would have been far more, again, that pan-Indianism, but it's doing its best, I guess you could say. But the other issue too is that you'll notice when I put an elder, what is something that these are the prompts I put in originally, and something that maybe you may not notice is that they're all men.
Men, yeah.
There is no women. Again, that assumption, that erasure of our culture, especially considering a lot of our Indigenous cultures, especially here in Canada, we're very matrilineal. I'm Mohawk. I'm half Mohawk, and which is a very matriarchal culture and society. So to me, I find this actually pretty offensive, that the idea that an Indigenous elder is only going to be a man, right? Mm-hmm. That shaman, and that's that shaman idea, which we don't really have. there's no mysticism or anything else like that. Often, our culture is really based in science and an attempt to understand the world around us. So this is this portrayal of an Indigenous person is a little offensive in my eyes. So where do we, and again, how do we make that better? How do we change that? Because what it's doing is, again, since it's scraping from the internet, which is, again, all of mostly Hollywood representation of Indigenous people. And again, didn't, women in Hollywood, there's not a lot. That representation is still very unequal. We don't have as many female-led movies. Uh, uh, they, if there is an idea for a female-led movie, oftentimes that gets passed over in favor of a male-led, you know, with the with action figures and
Oh,
everything
Sharon,
else like that.
yeah.
So with they can
Sharon, I think there's a bit of an issue with lag on your
consider
internet. Is anybody else hearing that?
Yes, so
Yeah.
Sharon, if you could
marketable.
video.
Even looking at for years and years, sports fan as well, is that it's so how do we make it the women's professional hockey? Do we take those ideas and make sure that the screen share, hopefully that helps. We talk about how we shape it and everything else like that. One of the things that was really from an Indigenous perspective is that how we train AI makes all the difference. So how do we train our own AI to make sure that the data that it's using and regurgitating is correct? And how is that, do we make it better? Can we, if we don't start thinking about this kind of thing now, we're going to end up with problems way down the road.
Yeah, it's just, it's going to kind of
And
continue
we always got to think about this.
Yeah. Yeah, and agreed.
Yeah,
Like,
we want to think about generations.
where it's kind of like right here, right now. And if it continues to go, it'll get wider and wider, right? As those bias continue to widen. I see the same thing in talking about women in technology, which I think is important, a very important conversation to have whenever we put anything about any question really for visuals in technology. The results tend to return as a male figure doing anything in technology. And so, there's some of those things I'm hopeful will be addressed sooner than later. But, it's hard to say because the political will is a bit different right now. And so, will that put enough pressure on some of these tech companies to make sure that they're considering bias when they're putting in their different data sets? There'll be a lot of questions that come up in the next little while. And yeah, I think that's a really important question. And Bonnie, I just noticed you put in here too. I come from the writing community, and what most writers are worried about is copyright. I think that is such a massive area too, because the bias is huge, and I'm very concerned about that. But for me, it's also like I'm concerned about the writers on my staff right now because there's a lot of people who just think, oh, I'll just throw this into AI and get it there. And again, right now, I need those writers. Like AI may put the base together, but Google actually is saying we're not going to prioritize a lot of AI generated content right now because it's just too much, and it's basically regurgitating content. So Google's actually prioritizing things that have trustworthiness, that have authority, you've actually been having true lived experience when it's actually doing SEO and that sort of thing. So we really need to, we need those writers. And, right now it's particularly important in content development online to have real humans creating this content. But this is something that we really need to be thinking about too, is that copyright piece. Who just had, all those writers from Post Media had all of their stuff just taken, right? And no acknowledgement, no anything in order to train models. There's a lot of American lawsuits going on right now too around those pieces. So it's actually, I believe that there's going to be a societal interest in data transparency coming up here, where there's actually going to be an expectation that AI companies will have a data transparency statement. And right now, a lot of people have those data transparency statements on their website, but it really addresses how they're using personal information and how they're using the user's information in terms of sign in and, you know, where's the security of your password going to be stored, less on the here's where the data actually came from. And I think that that's going to change, that we're going to start to see a lot more people having to actually share. Here's our transparency statement. Here's how we actually created the content for our website. Here's how we actually created these different pieces. We had an author. Here's the author. And, you know, I think that those things will be changing, become more important in the future.
I think this just speaks so strongly to how important it is to have relationships with the people that you're working with. Like Sharon, you know, if you're generating an image, you know, well, first of all, I don't even know if it's appropriate to ask the AI to create an image for you. But, you know, if you're generating it, you need to actually have people like from the community that you're working with look at it and say, oh, no, that's not right. Like people that you have relationships with. You know, everything is about these personal human relationships. And, you know, Katrina, on your slides, you had at one point, you know, humans will always be involved, and you had that in all caps. I mean, it's so important to think about this as a tool and not as the end product, as both of you highlighted and you know, has really come to the fore today in this discussion. And also the, you know, when we're looking at anything Indigenous, I mean, in our research network, we really take a distinctions-based approach, which means we're looking at the individual, you know, communities and peoples that we're working with. So we always specify First Nations, Métis, or Inuit in our research networks across the country, and then down to the community level when we're able to. And we use in the term Indigenous much more on kind of a global and the federal government is going that way as well, because people's experiences in communities and, you know, their historical experiences and their lived experiences now are so different, and pan-indigeneity doesn't serve anybody well.
Are there any other questions from the group?
You know, like I said, I come from the writing community, and I have three main people that I deal with. So academics who are really worried about ethics and privacy issues and so forth. And I deal with writers who are worried about copyright and misuse of their information, because right now you can say to ChatGPT, I want a short story in the style of Stephen King. And it will write you a short story in the style of Stephen King. I've tested it with some poet friends of mine, and when I asked it to write me a poem, and I'm not a poet at all. I can't rhyme 2 words to save my life, but it did write me a poem in the style and form of my friend Bernadette, because some of her stuff is on the internet. And she said, yes, it could have come from her brain. And I also deal with photographers who are very worried about misuse and copyright. And then there's nonprofits, right? So nonprofits are seeing this as somewhat of a savior because they're underfunded. And they need tools like this to be able to quickly devise a budget or quickly create a social media post about something that they've produced. So with, you know, we've got so many perspectives coming at this, and it's people like you, Katrina and Sharon, that are helping this conversation along. I don't know where it's going to end up, but I do know that, Sharon, I agree with you in that, you know, we're having the same conversations over and over again. I imagine when the printing press came on the scene that they had this similar conversations about, oh my God, this is going to replace us, especially in the clergy. Now people can have access to God and faith, you know, all by themselves, because now there's Bibles in the home. When we, you know, the internet first came on the scene, we had similar conversations about, oh my God, now everybody's got access to this information. Everybody can blog. What's going to happen to actual writers? And, you know, now when social media came on the scene, we had the same conversations, like you were saying, you know, with the iPads and the screens in front of our kids. So obviously humanity hasn't figured this out yet. So I think there will always be a place for a human. AI cannot reproduce the spark that is in our soul. It just can't, right? That's human, and that's what we connect to when we read stories, when we, engage with people, we connect to that human experience. So I don't think AI can replace that. What I do think AI can do, it can help us work more efficiently, more effectively. So someone who uses AI to, the way it should be used to benefit and augment what they do, those people might come in and replace us. And I just wondered what the two of you kind of thought about that and, where it's going.
From my perspective, one of the biggest jobs that are hot right now are AI prompt engineers. You basically people who can do good prompting and get good results. The jobs are in AI engineering. Actually, Meta Zuckerberg just announced yesterday, there's just going to be a whole new era of AI coming in development. He said he doesn't know how it's going to affect jobs, but that's, he's ushering it into his organization, and he'll be looking for more AI engineers. So I do think, from just a technology development space, there's going to be a lot of people who are put into that space, but we have to remember, when you're thinking about like actually development, it's a very, people who are developers have, it's a very linear type of thinking. It's a very unique way of thinking to create development. And so we need as many people who think that way from a lot of different backgrounds to join into that particular profession. For me, with the AI we're developing, like I'm not a developer. I can do the business side of it. My business partner, she's a developer. And it's really important to me to work with her because, to be able to put more things out, from a female perspective in the way that we see the world. And, technology is supposed to be a tool to help us solve problems. So, we need different people's organization, different people solving different communities' problems, using it. So I look at it from the technology perspective that I don't think this is going to be stopping. I think we're going to see a lot more AI engineers and that becoming a skill set that'll be incredibly important in the industry. And again, it's a limited skill set. There's only certain people that think that way. And so, if you're in an underrepresented group, including women, who want to, get out there and change this and be a part of it, that'd be my call to action essentially is, can you get into some sort of development? Can you help people from different communities solve their issues? Because we do need different ways of thinking involved in the creation of the future.
I totally agree. Like I said, if you want that accurate representation, speak up, be a part of that conversation, and contribute to whether or not we are help guide it. I guess you could say, instead of just letting it get out of hand on its own. I always tell my students, we do things with intention. And when we do things with intention, it helps, we grow much faster, we learn much faster, and we also, when we don't do things with intention, what ends up happening is if we just dive in, which is where we're at the moment with the development of AI, is that when we just dive in and let things happen, mistakes, uh, damage can
Oh no, Sharon, you're freezing up again.
so when I teach my students that all of that is technically take off my video then. So when we talk about tension, we want to guide it as opposed to just letting it happen, because when we let things happen, things get out of hand much faster, right? So like Katrina said, we need to start this conversation now. We need to be a part of it, cognizant that that it is an issue, and try and be a part of it. And I don't think it's a good idea to just let it happen. I think we really need to have these conversations like what they're, because everything when it comes to tech, that is technology at its base, is that it's to improve the lives of improve our lives and make things easier for every generation that comes afterwards. Because we talk about parents and things like that. Nobody wants their children to suffer like they did, right? So we should think about it that way, and we should again do it with intention and move forward with that in mind. Is how is this going to affect our future generations, not just us today? So that's it. And Bonnie's comment about how AI can do the writing, but it's boring and flat. We connect with that information, and we absolutely should. We should think about that on a day. But is that, and again, and that uncanny valley is also evident in the music it produces and the art that it produces, like the not just the images, but we see that uncanny valley in how it writes as well, right? You're missing that human perspective of that emotional connection to the information that it's regurgitating. And you can actually see it when you read what AI has written or what music AI has created, not just in the images. That uncanny valley spreads all the way across AI. So, and again, we want to be cognizant of all of that and make sure that we can and will uh, be aware and doing it with intention. So we're guiding it in a way that's going to be useful and kinder and make the lives of our future generations better, not just Terminator.
Yeah, that's right. Terminator. Skynet is coming. I don't think we're close to that yet, but who knows? Anything is possible. Well, we've gone a couple of minutes over the hour, and I'm really cognizant and respectful of your guys' time. So we're going to wrap this up. I want to thank everyone for attending. KM in the AM is popular because of you. And we will keep it going as long as you have stuff you want to learn. You will get the link to the recording and a few other goodies in a wrap-up email that I will send out over the coming days. Katrina, are you willing to share your slides?
Yes. Yeah.
Perfect. And if you and also, can you send me your 10 most favorite AI newsletters that you get?
Okay. Yeah, I get about 20, so I'll pick my favorites. Yeah.
Your favorite ones, that'd be amazing. And Sharon, could you send me a link to that program you were using to generate the pictures? That would be amazing if you could. And any other resources?
Sure. It's actually just Copilot through Office 365. So if you have Office 365, the waffle in the top corner, the top left corner where it's got the 9 dots, click on that, and then Copilot is offered in there, and you can check it out from Office 365. Copilot is just one of them. There's also, of course, Canva and all sorts of different AIs, image generating AI.
Perfect. Well, again, thank you, Sharon and Katrina, for willing to share your knowledge with us. I learned a lot today, and I hope everyone else did. And again, just watch your email inboxes for that wrap-up email that we'll send you. And be aware that membership in KM in the AM is free. We don't charge you a cent, so you will have the link in the email to become a member, and that will give you access to future trainings. And we do have some more AI stuff coming down the pipeline. And it is our 10th anniversary year. So, we're going to try and do something in every month of the year coming up. And if there's something particular you want to learn about, just let us know. And so with that, I will let you guys back to your day. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. And Fleur, did you want to stay on for a few minutes?
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, sure.
All right. Thanks, Bonnie. Thanks, Fleur.
Mhm.
Okay, have a good day.
You.
Thanks, guys. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, Sharon.
And Corey, hi.
Hey, I'm here, so.
Okay, well, we'll just stop the. Oh, it has stopped. Did the recording stop on us? Anyway, we'll have to check that out. I do have backups, so Spinach also recorded. So if we have to get it that way, we can get it that way.
Oh, good.
And then just the ITS, there we go.
I moved a few people to the waiting room.
Oh,
So-
good. I was waiting for people to.
No, I know. Yeah, so we didn't end up having a conversation after like the emails, but I'll reach out to Katrina and Sharon around the honorarium. So, because we need some information from them, and I don't know if Sharon wants one or not. It's her choice. So, yeah.
No, thank you for doing that. That's
Yeah, and then after this is sort of online, I think we'll share it because we didn't end up sharing it very much across the nears. So, which was like,
share it.
we
Words
kind of
up.
lost track of it. All of a sudden it was like happening.
Although we had 40 people register and our top number was 26. So that's actually not bad. I mean,
Mhm. But having it recorded and being able to share it out afterwards is great. And I mean, it was a good session. So
it was a good session. Once Sharon got over being a little bit nervous, she had some good stuff to say. And
well, it was really interesting to hear what she's talking to her students about.
yeah, exactly. And so, she's doing it right. I mean, I always tell people AI is not going away. It's here to stay. We're not putting the toothpaste back in the tube. So we have to teach people how to use it. And I know from JSGS, there was a few professors there that, they know their students are using it to create their essays and papers and assignments. In fact, in the beginning, about 2 or 3 years ago, people used to leave in that here's your answer sort of tagline from the AI, like when you ask it that, and they had papers that were being submitted to actual journals. Some professors were just cut and pasting. They found instances in grant applications where it was just cut and paste. And those sort of, I guess, intro lines or, here's your stuff. I hope you're happy lines were being left in. I know it's crazy. And now a lot of the journals have the I guess disclaimer about using, or they have policies around using AI. And now, Chat GPT, you can actually get like an MLA citation back to that particular conversation. So there's things coming along that way, but yeah, the academic circles are not impressed with AI usage. But until we teach people how to use it properly, I mean, it's going to keep doing it. And also there's one librarian she's at Edwards. Her name's Anne Liang. You should connect with her, Fleur. She is.
Oh, I've gone to a talk with her before, I think. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And she said that there's actually, so it's in the courts right now. The U of S has some court cases with the journal article people, the journals. Who should police this is the big question. Should
Yeah.
university restrict and police use of AI, which doesn't make sense because of, just the fact of open learning, or should it be, put onto the journals? And there is a lot of bias that comes from that. So it'll be interesting to see how they turn out. But yes, we do have a couple more AI stuff coming. I've got an October session and her name is Dawn Henwood. She is an independent knowledge mobilizer, similar to what Peter used to do. And I recently connected with her. She's very good. She's going to do AI and capacity in October. I think I've added her to the list. Anyway, I'll send you our schedule. So we need somebody for November and December and July, I think. So if you have any more people from the NEHR circles, let's try and highlight you guys a little bit more. That's kind of what I want to do, is highlight you guys.
Well, if you're focused around AI, I mean, we could see about Dylan Merrick, one of the PhD students who's working in AI and health.
It doesn't have to be AI.
Talk.
It doesn't have to be.
Mhm.
We do AI stuff coming up, but if there's just anyone like that's you're aware of that's doing something in this area, that's great, but it can be on another topic. I don't know your network very well, so I don't know what what
Yeah.
your big topics are, but I imagine, you're promoting students and that sort of stuff. Can you, sorry, Corey, go ahead.
Yeah, one thing just on this note about kind of promoting the near too as well through this. I think there's an excellent opportunity here for reciprocity post the talk happening, because we can post on our socials and refer people to follow KM in the AM on appropriate channels, and we can also boost that post, and through that we're also reaching a wider audience ourselves. It would, I think, be fantastic if Katrina could even share a post, would be amazing. Just
Ask her to. If you send her, like if it's on Twitter and you send her a DM,
yeah, okay.
post it, and she's got a massive network of people on all of them.
That's why I'd love to have her if she could share one of our posts or something like that. It'd be great for both KM and the AM and the SK near, because it'd go out to so many people.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, make it
Yeah.
if you have a post you want to share on Facebook, put the post in an email or link to the post in the email so that she can just, click done.
Cool.
Yeah, she'll do it for me all the time. I ask her to post stuff.
Great.
And active on, well, actually, I think she's considering like I've left Twitter/X.
Oh, Fleur and I talk about that too, whether it's the best place for
Yeah.
an Indigenous and Métis or First Nations and Métis Health Research Network to be.
Yeah, so it's, you gotta, Elon Musk has ruined it. I mean, Twitter used to be my absolute favorite. I was all about Twitter all the time. I loved it. Then he came along and I don't love it anymore.
I read there's a book about it's called what is it called? I think it's called Character Limit, how Elon Musk ruined Twitter. So I got that out of the library and read it. It was fascinating because I also talked about the history of Twitter. But Elon Musk is very similar to Donald Trump. I realized
Really?
that reading the book. Like, it's no wonder the two of them get along. So he basically bought Twitter and renamed it so he could just have it as his own, like, sounding board.
And he could get Trump back on it because Trump wanted back on Twitter.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's like,
but it's like,
I erased my profiles, but I downloaded all my data and I didn't erase the profiles because I don't want someone else taking my name and using it on Twitter or X. So, but I don't post there. And I've taken down KM in the AM. I don't post.
yeah, it seems like it's not. I mean, Facebook is even questionable, except it's huge in Indigenous communities. So,
Exactly. So Facebook,
we just
are okay with. Instagram, I've been playing around with. I'm okay there. Yeah, so it's social media is just, it's a mess. It started out really fun. Now it's just a mess.
anyway, we should probably wrap it up
Yeah.
here. So
Anyway, thank you for doing the intros and stuff today. Thanks, Corey, for getting the Zoom going. And I will send you the login information for YouTube. And
Okay.
I'll draft the descriptions and stuff. If you have any other things that you need for that, just let me know.
yeah, and we'll get another date around an in-person, like 10th anniversary celebration. I'll have to look at Bobby's schedule, but I know we talked about March, but we want a lot of time to actually properly promote it. So we'll see. Now, since you have stuff lined up and you said it's not a problem to do two things in 1 month, then it's not tied to March. So yeah.
But you can do it whenever. Not September, because September's so busy for the academic folks.
Yeah, it'd be nice to do it like in the spring, like like March, April, May, something like that. So, yeah.
And
But
we don't have to tie it to the 10th anniversary. It'll just be like, hey, we're back in person. Kind of like a rah-rah thing.
I think it could be a celebration of 10 years of KM in the AM. I think that's probably makes sense. So,
Oh, and Corey, I've been getting positive feedback on the logo you designed. So
Awesome.
well done. Well done, sir.
Thank you. That's always good to hear for sure.
I like it. I mean, the sign worked really great but it does next to your logo, it looks really sad. So
I'll also appreciate it.
all right. Awesome.
Okay, well, Flora, if you need any help planning the in-person thing, just let me know. And
No, I don't think so. It's really getting the date and, the locate. I mean, we want to have it at the Good Medicine People Space on campus, and then, making sure it's available and Bobby's available. Because I think really we just talked about having a, you and I talk a bit about KM and the AM and the 10 years, and then Bobby talking about, I mean, he talked at the very first one, and he's done so many different things around knowledge mobilization now. So really kind of his arts-based research and knowledge mobilization. I think that's, he might have like, I could see him having some community partners come. So yeah, he's done a lot of video stuff lately. So yeah.
Well, and see if your student there that you mentioned would be willing to do a November, December KM in the AM.
Oh, Dylan. Yeah, I'm sure he probably would be. So
Because
yeah.
we need November, December, and I believe July is open.
You still want to do December, eh? December is a hard sell. You were committed to doing something every month.
I know, but it's like I want to do something in every single month, and just because, unless I get a job. I actually have an interview with the University of Calgary for a national network coordinator for CRISM, CRISM, and
Oh, okay.
it's basically about substance abuse is what they deal with. So we'll see how that works out. If I get a job, then we might not be as available much for KM in the AM. But every job I do take, KM in the AM is in it. I always make that clear, and people are pretty.
Yeah. Okay, good.
All right. Well, see you later, guys.
Okay, I'll talk to you later. Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks, good. Oh, I guess it's my Zoom now. Okay, Bonnie handed it over to me, so I'll end it.
Okay.
All right.